is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to talk about the question, why are we alive and what is our purpose here on planet Earth? Now, this was a question that literally consumed me when I was a kid. From my earliest boyhood memories, raised in an atheistic household in New York City, I was literally obsessed with the questions, why was I alive? What is my purpose in life? And, what am I supposed to do? And that I wrestled with those thoughts constantly. And what bothered me the most, even as a young boy, is that nobody else seemed to care anything about those thoughts. So I would attempt to bring it up to my parents, and they were polite or whatever. Whenever I brought it up in school, forget about it. I mean, you just don't ask questions like that. But you see, I've never been a kind of person that just goes with the flow. I've never been the kind of person who, just because everybody's marching in one direction, I'm not going to necessarily go in that direction. So to me, even as a small boy, it was obvious that if I didn't have the answer to life's most basic questions, like why am I alive? What is my purpose in life? What am I doing here? Then nothing else made sense. Because even in my childhood mind, I pondered the inevitability of the fact that everybody dies. So this life that we have comes to an end for all of us, again, unless we're part of the generation that's alive when Jesus Christ returns. All of our lives come to an end. And I could not understand why it was a taboo to talk about that. I mean, nobody ever said to me, well, you can't talk about that, but just their reactions communicated to me that you just don't talk about those things. And then as society began to degrade over the decades, even as a young child, you could talk about all kinds of things, let's say in the sexual arena of life. There was such a radical transformation in the belief system of people in America as I was growing up. Things that you would, for example, never dare to discuss when I was an early child. By the time I was in my teens and later teens, society had changed so radically that you could talk about all kinds of stuff out in the open, which would once have been, obscene. And it has continued in that direction, and it's accelerating. So, for example, the United Nations 2030 agenda, which is not what it appears to be. It appears to be the solution to climate change, overpopulation, equal wealth redistribution, social justice, etc. And those are all lies. They're lies designed to appeal to the uneducated masses. And I'm not saying that in a condescending manner. When I say uneducated masses, that includes college graduates, people who graduate from Yale and Harvard. It's designed to appeal to people who don't know the reality or truth of what's behind the United Nations, what its real plan is. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. The United Nations is nothing more than a smiley face on a dark agenda to create a one-world socialist government. And I remember reading that for decades. Socialist government. I always get stuck on the word socialist government. I mean, I said to myself, come on, you can't be serious. Why would the United Nations be interested in creating a one-world socialist government? Because after all, I said, this was when I was in my teens, I said, after all, socialism has failed wherever it's been tried. Why would we unify the world under a failing system, which has always failed? But see, back then, as a teenager, I didn't understand the full truth regarding the United Nations and things like that. The United Nations is a wolf in sheep's clothing because it's designed to seduce the masses into thinking it's a benevolent, kind, and after all, when we get rid of all the borders and merge all the nations into one, like the late Beatle John Lennon sang about in his song Imagine there's no heaven, no nations, countries, or borders, his utopian dream, before he was assassinated by a programmed psychopath. People are programmed today to believe the United Nations agendas are really going to heal the planet and heal, because you see, people want to believe. They want to believe that there's some good organization. They want to believe despite the facts. That's called, as you know, being irrational. When your rational mind leads you to see objectively the rational facts in history, or you read rationally the facts, the game plan of like UN Agenda 2030, when you really understand it, and you don't have to be Einstein to figure it out, you understand that it has nothing to do with what it says it has something to do with. All of that is camouflage, because the brutal purpose of the UN is to create not a one world socialist government in the manner that people think it's going to be. The agenda behind the UN Agenda 2030 is really to create a one world order that consists of a one world government, one world religion, one world economic system, exactly as the Bible predicted, beginning in the book of Genesis at ancient Babylon at the time of the Tower of Babel, and culminating in the tribulation period in the book of Revelation, where you see the return of Mystery Babylon. And what is Mystery Babylon? It's the return of this one world government, one world religion, one world economic system, which is headed up, as the Bible prophesies, headed up first by the Antichrist, who's indwelt by Satan. And the Antichrist is a world charismatic leader who is the head of this one world government. And then he's called the first beast. And then the second beast is what the Bible calls the false prophet. And the false prophet is head of the one world government, and the false prophet is head of the one world economic system, and the false prophet is head of the one world religion. But the false prophet also performs counterfeit supernatural signs and wonders to deceive the whole earth, so that people will believe that the first beast, the Antichrist, is God. So the false prophet calls fire down supernaturally from heaven, and so on and so forth. So these two beasts usher in the New World Order, or the return of Mystery Babylon, which is a one world government, one world religion, one world economic system. And in that economic system and spiritual system is the mark of the beast 666. So the Bible predicted what the UN agenda is. Now, it may turn out that it is not the United Nations, which is the organizational platform for this fulfillment of Bible prophecy. They may raise up an entirely new entity, or they may use another existing entity like NATO or whatever. But the point is, this globalist system is definitely the number one agenda behind what I call, and others now call, the globalist elite. These are the most powerful and wealthy international banking families in the world. And they're throwing all of their resources behind bringing the world supposedly together for the betterment of mankind. Supposedly because when mankind unites in a one world government like the UN, and that will end all wars. It will solve poverty, and the world will be in unity, and it will be utopia or heaven on earth. And that's exactly the grave and serious sin that the people of the original ancient Babylon committed before God. Because the first New World Order, the first one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system arose at ancient Babylon at the time of the Tower of Babel. And that system, the Babylonian system, was a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world economic system. And remember what happens when you read the account in Genesis, that God comes down and God can see into the heart and mind of mankind. And he sees that mankind is being seduced by Lucifer. They want to be like gods. And so their hearts are Luciferian. And their unity, which gives them power, human unity does produce power, earthly power. Their unity is really ultimately a rebellion from the true God, the God of the Bible. Because remember, this world, planet Earth, was created by the infinite personal living God of the universe, or the God of the Bible. Planet Earth was created by the God of the Bible for his reasons. Mankind, starting with Adam and Eve, not by evolution, was created by God for his purposes. And God revealed to us right at the very beginning, he revealed his heart. He revealed his master plan, which was, it was his highest desire that every man and woman, mankind, would live in paradise on earth. And it was called the Garden of Eden. That was the template. That was the blueprint. That was God's plan. That each of us, all of us, would live in paradise, the Garden of Eden, forever as immortal beings, a true heaven on earth. And to ensure that that happened, God gave Adam and Eve the supernatural power of God, the supernatural authority of God, the supernatural wisdom of God, in order that they would rule and reign over planet Earth and the Garden of Eden, that they were to be like the kings and queens of planet Earth. And they still had to answer to God because there was only one Lord. Mankind was not Lord. Adam and Eve knew that the Lord was the Lord. But God only gave Adam and Eve one commandment. Only one. So he said, here's paradise, enjoy it. They had the perfect relationship, perfect age, no sickness, no disease, no pollution, no problems whatsoever. But the only commandment which God gave Adam and Eve, they disobeyed. So this fallen angel, who right now this fallen angel is leading this raging battle that I keep talking about. This fallen angel, whose name is Lucifer, or Satan, is leading this raging battle in both the spiritual world and the physical world. Right now, even as I speak, and as many of you are listening all around the world, there's a raging spiritual battle going on. And there has been nothing like it in the history of mankind. This battle is so intense, we literally are at the final hour. Now, does that mean a literal 60 minutes? No, I don't think so. But we're talking about right now, we are in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. That's not an embellishment. It's not an overstatement. That's why I've titled my new book, which is available for pre-order at paulmcguire.us. That's the title of the book because it captures the very core of what I believe is true. And my beliefs are based not on my opinions, they're based on research and a careful study of God's Word from Genesis to Revelation. And if you read God's Word, Genesis to Revelation, it is very, very clear that we're in the last days and the latter part of the last days. And we are in the time period which God predicted in the Bible when this greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind is occurring. It's right now at this second. And yet, tragically, as I've shared with you continually in recent weeks, tragically, the vast majority of Bible-believing, so-called Bible-believing Christians or evangelical Christians, the vast majority of them, especially in America, have absolutely no idea. They're absolutely clueless. They're so disconnected from God and His Word that the vast majority of people who say they're God's people in America, the evangelical church, they have absolutely no clue or awareness that this is it prophetically, and we are right in the middle, the apex of the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. They are completely tuned out to that fact. Now, how can you be completely tuned out to that fact when, first of all, the physical evidence of the battle is all around you? As I've discussed in the book, there are so many things happening now that have never happened before in the history of the world. Scientifically, technologically, socially, culturally. I'm telling you, anybody who's even minimally aware that some people had, in New York City, don't ask me why, I was never really fond of frogs, but they had pet frogs and they lived in apartments. You may have had a pet frog. You may like frogs. Frogs bug me. I don't like frogs. I don't like a lot of these weird creatures. It's like they bug me. But sorry, that's just a personal prejudice. I'm not a big fan of frogs. And aren't frog legs supposed to be a delicacy somewhere? I think I heard that once. I have no desire to eat frog legs. I don't care if it's a delicacy or not. So the point is that even a frog has minimal awareness. My cat has minimal awareness. To me, the brain of a cat is as mysterious. No, this will come off as I will definitely be categorized as being non-politically correct. And so I don't even want to go there because it'll be a divergent thing to get into, and then the whole point of what I'm trying to say will be lost. But animals have awareness. Animals can usually sense, and many of you have experienced this, whether it's horses or cats or dogs or other kinds of animals or pets or birds or whatever. They often can sense danger coming before it happens. They have senses that we don't have, or their senses are more finely tuned in certain area that we don't have. For example, and you probably have your own stories to tell that could enrich this, but cats and dogs in California act strangely well before an earthquake happens, like the day before or 2 days before. They'll act strange. And if you're really paying attention to your pet will have this invisible radar system of some kind. Maybe it can sense the electromagnetic fields interacting with the tectonic plates under the surface of the earth. I don't know. It can sometimes detect storms before they occur. I've heard many people over the years complain of bodily aches and pains and arthritis and pain in their joints before it rains or before a storm comes in. And people have, and pets, especially horses and cattle and dogs and stuff like that, have a sense of danger before it happens. So they have a knowing, and God put that in them so they could survive. But we all know that God created men and women, mankind. We are the highest level of God's creation. Some people think that God made the angels as a higher order than us. That's not true. We are higher than the angels. We are the ultimate of God's creation, because we're godlike in many ways. I didn't say we were God. Oh, there's only one God, Jesus. But we have godlike attributes. And all of that is possible because God gave us free choice, which is the power to rebel against him. We're not robots. So, animals have an instinct. Little babies have an instinct. Children have an instinct. Sometimes children can be deceived like adults. But if you introduce a young child, to a bad person, and what do I mean by a bad person? Well, you fill in the blanks. And maybe you don't know that the person's a bad person, but maybe you have a sense of being uncomfortable around them because there's something that you perceive about them that you can't quite put your finger on, but it's like it floats in and out of your conscious and subconscious mind that this person might be, God forbid, a pedophile or capable of doing evil or violence. It's amazing how young children can pick that up. They're not always accurate, but they can pick it up sometimes better than adults can. And they run away from this kind of adult. And animals, I've heard many times when animals can do this for the wrong reasons and the right reasons, but many times an animal's instinct, like a dog especially, or a cat, the dog will start barking or growling if somebody is evil or there's something potentially dangerous, something's off balance with somebody or somebody's, your dog will let you know. So this is a God-given capacity that he's given to the lower orders of his creation. How much more do you think God has given? We are God's highest level of creation. Mankind. Because we're made in the image of God. So we obviously must have the highest level of I don't want to use the word instinct, but let's just use the word instinct. We have to have the highest level of instinct. It must be embedded in us. It must be software that we have. I suspect that we don't use it. We don't access it like we should because I believe we have it. And I think some of it has to do with training. I often talk to you about my mother, who I dearly love, who's an atheist, or she says she's an atheist. I keep sharing the Lord with her. I've shared the Lord with many members of my family, and many of them have come to Christ, praise the Lord. But I'm praying for my mother, and I wanted her to come to the Lord. And I'm praying against the obstacles that I believe that are causing her to resist the Lord. So anyway, she taught me when I was a young boy, and my sisters, because she was from Missouri, it's like a common sense state, show me. The people in Missouri are like more down to earth than New Yorkers. So she would look at a guy or a woman or whatever, and in seconds, and she was usually right. Women usually have a more developed level of instinct than most males do. It's not always the case. But on the average, I would say there's a much higher percentage of women who have an instinct that men don't always have. Some men have it, but I think more women have it. In any case, my mother had a very developed sense of instinct, for lack of a better word. And she taught me, as I've shared with you, look into somebody's eyes. Look at their face. What are their eyes saying? People tell you about themselves if you just simply look at them. I'm not talking about if they have a nice haircut or they're skinny or they're overweight. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about what is projected. See, what you are, the choices you make, whether they're choices for evil or good, whether you're jealous and envious and you wish horrible things on people, what's going on in your heart and mind? Your inner nature. Are you judgmental? Are you self-righteous? Uh, are you a thief or whatever? All of this stuff, and Christ, that's why Christ talks about this so often. He continually talks about the importance of things like forgiveness, not to be envious, to love one another, to not have bitterness, a root of bitterness, to love, to forgive, to have a thankful spirit, to cultivate joy in the Holy Spirit. Christ is always putting his finger in the biblical teachings. And these teachings are in Proverbs and Psalms also, and throughout the Bible. But Christ is always talking about the inner condition of our souls and spirits. The spirit is the spiritual nature that we have. And the soul is the emotions, the memories, things like that. So what we are internally, which we may be attempting to hide from the world, we generate it through our eyes. They say the eyes are the window to the soul. I believe that. You can look in people's eyes, and you can make mistakes in your judgment. That's why you got to be really careful about judging people, because we've all been wrong, including me. And so, we need to be very careful about what we say. There's nothing, we're told not to falsely judge people. So, but who people are generates scientifically who you are, the emotions that you carry in you. It generates a specific electromagnetic frequency from your body, your soul, and your spirit. So, for example, if you're in depression or anxiety, I'm not saying this to put anybody down, but that means your brain waves, the EMF waves, the electromagnetic frequencies, are operating in your brain at certain frequencies if you're depressed or anxious or you're filled with rage and anger or whatever. But it also generates from your physical body because you store emotions in your stomach and your heart, etc. So what's going on in your inner being, good or bad, generates a specific electromagnetic frequency or frequencies that other people who are sensitive can pick up. I was talking to a very, very intelligent person the other day, and I can't publicly discuss anything more than that, but simply to say that this person was one of the most perceptive people I think I've ever met, and a person who's very much involved in, let's just call them high-level activities. And he was talking about something that was very interesting, and I can't really disclose the exact nature or contents of the conversation. But he was talking about how, and this is a really sharp guy, sharp. He was talking about when he goes into certain environments, and whenever he's in an environment that is run on, let's call it a fear and power mode. And that's the way a whole lot of corporations and businesses and tragically families and many groupings in society run on this fear and power mode, where the people who have the power want everybody under them to be terrified of them. And they run their businesses. The way they control people is the people under them are terrified of them, literally terrified of them. And you have massive corporations and all kinds of groups and organizations that basically utilize fear as a control system, and that gives them power. Now, this guy is not even close to insecure, not insecure whatsoever. And this guy is not a guy that's afraid either, not even close to being afraid. But he's very perceptive, and he says, he told me that he has like a bodily sensation, a physiological reaction when he's in a room of powerful movers and shakers who are running sometimes massive corporations and entities on fear and power. He said he described it as I forgot his exact words, but like physiologically, like vibrationally feeling this energy, And this guy's not some new age guy or anything like that. Okay, very rational person, but very perceptive person. But he says he can feel it in the room, and you have too. I've never felt it to that degree. Maybe you've never felt it to that degree, but he regularly experiences it because in the higher level arenas in which he operates, a lot of systems and organizations, etc., run on fear. Dictatorships, communist regimes, totalitarian governments all run on brutal, naked fear. People are terrified. Okay? And that's the way they control people. Okay, so when he walks in a room, before people open their mouths, he can feel it vibrationally. And you can feel things vibrationally. And this isn't New Age. It's an instinct God has given you. Because you see, when people, especially more than one, we're always all sending out a electromagnetic vibrational field. That's science. I mean, you can't sit there and say it's New Age. You just might as well have a neon sign above your head saying, I'm ignorant. You're generating EMF frequency. So if you're in a state of fear because of the way the company you work for or the job you have operates, and you're in a constant state of fear, and so are all the other employees, because that's the way the bosses want it, you're collectively sending out a vibrational pattern of fear. And people who are sensitive and are aware of, you see, most people have not been trained or have not developed their God-given capacity to pull in all the information that their God-given sense of perception should be pulling in. So many people are. It has nothing to do with whether you went to college or not. I'd say more people in college have been dumbed down and they've lost the ability to perceive. So he can perceive this. We've all been in a room or a place where we feel like something bad has happened, or there's something evil in the room, or fear, or whatever. We've all picked that. I mean, I've worked in the corporate world years ago, and I remember working in this horrible job, which was totally run by fear. And this guy who was kind of New Age-ish came into the corporation, and he was talking to me, and he just blurted out. He said, "Wow, this place is toxic." It was making him sick. The atmosphere of fear in this corporate environment was making this guy sick. And it makes people oftentimes sick. So you see, God has given us this awareness if we use it. So going back to being in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world, anybody who's even minimally perceiving reality correctly, anybody who has any ability to mentally process information and facts, you can see evidence of this all around you. You can hear evidence of this all around you. If you know anything about history and patterns, I mean, even minimally, you can logically perceive this. And then, of course, most importantly, if you read the Word of God, the entire Word of God from Genesis to Revelation, not just cherry pick one or two or three verses out of context like the average evangelical sermon or seeker-friendly sermon is really just like it's tailored for a third grade mind. So the people are deaf, dumb, and blind. You know, when Jesus Christ was healing the blind and opening deaf ears and so on and so forth, he was doing that, yes, because there was a physical problem, but Jesus was also using that as a method of saying loudly to those people who can listen, you're not only just deaf because of a biological hearing problem, or you blind because of a biological problem with your eyes. You're deaf and you're blind because of your will, but you choose not to see. You choose not to hear. And that's the problem with a huge percentage of the evangelical church. God goes out of his way in his word to tell us through the countless biblical prophecies, beginning in the Old Testament, beginning in Genesis, and then going all the way through the New Testament to the book of Revelation. God is telling us over and over again, and it even builds to a crescendo, where Jesus Christ is talking about the signs of the times, in which Jesus is giving you and I and everyone who's alive, especially in this time period, because we are in the last days now, Jesus Christ is giving us a prophetic heads up of what will be the signs of the times immediately before his return. So before the second coming of Jesus Christ, there are going to be such indistinguishable signs and patterns and evidences that have never happened before at the level that are now happening. We live in that time. But you have so many people in so many churches who the reason they go to church is not to worship God. They say they love God. How can you love God if you don't love his word? How can you love God if you don't love his presence? They go there for social reasons, to find a mate or whatever. I don't know why they're going there, but they're not going there to worship God. They're not going there to study God's word. How can you go to study God's word if you're only getting 3 verses out of context? I mean, you can go to like an Avengers movie and get more spiritual information. A lot of it may not necessarily be good spiritual information. It may be hidden occultic information, but at least there's something being communicated to you. Okay, so when we read Jesus Christ's words in the book of Matthew, Jesus Christ talks about the signs of the times. And he talks about these signs of the times in other areas of the Bible. So in Matthew 24:25, we read about, we read about what's going to happen. So in Matthew 24, starting in verse 1, the word says, "Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, 'Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down.'" Now, we need to pay attention to what Jesus Christ said here, because he was talking to his disciples, and behind them, again, was one of the most magnificent Jewish temples in Jewish history, because King Herod helped to finance and build this temple, and it was called Herod's Temple. But Jesus Christ was speaking prophetically, not only to us, but to his disciples, because he was predicting, and he could only have predicted this because he knew the future. He knew what was coming in the immediate future. And the Bible is packed with biblical prophecies that accurately predict what is going to happen in the future. And so the Bible is the only spiritual book written in the history of mankind where there are thousands of prophecies in which God predicts something and it has come to pass exactly as God's word has described it. So here, Jesus Christ, because he's Lord, is supernaturally giving them a prophecy about what's going to happen in the relatively near future. And he tells them regarding this magnificent temple, King Herod's temple. And he says to them, as he's pointing to the temple, and Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things?" The magnificence of the temple buildings. "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." So it was relatively soon after Christ had ascended into heaven and the church was birthed, that a Roman general invaded Jerusalem, where the temple was, and this Roman general, filled with fury and rage, tore apart Herod's temple stone by stone, so that not one stone was left upon another. And this was a supernatural prediction by Jesus Christ. And it was from there that, which was also prophesied in Scripture, the Jews were sold into slavery and sent to all the four corners of the earth. And that's called the Great Dispersion of the Jewish people. They were dispersed from Jerusalem and Israel because they rejected Christ as their Lord and Savior. The temple was destroyed, and they were sold into slavery to all the nations of the earth. And so this is another miracle, and this was predicted in numerous places in the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible predicted that in the last days, we're in the last days, that the Jews would be supernaturally and miraculously returned to Israel and Jerusalem in the last days. Now remember, they were removed from Israel and Jerusalem for over 2,000 years. And then in 1948, miraculously, the Jews were restored to Israel and Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. A major fulfillment of biblical prophecy, because God promised that the children of Abraham, the Jewish people, that the physical descendants of Abraham, not the church, if you spiritualize what God is speaking about, God clearly is speaking about in Old Testament prophecy. When God enters into a supernatural covenant with the children of Abraham, Abraham's physical descendants, God promises them in an everlasting covenant. And everlasting means it is without end. Okay? That means that God is promising to the physical descendants of Abraham that this is not on the basis if they're moral, if they're righteous, if they're obeying the law or the commandments of God. This covenant is not based upon that. It's like legal language. You have to read God's law clearly in order to understand it. This is an everlasting covenant, a unilateral covenant, which means it's one-sided. God knocked Abraham out and put him in a trance state, and Abraham was like asleep on the floor, and God cut the covenant by passing two torches. Usually it requires two parties to enter into a covenantal agreement, like the covenant of marriage. So normally, in a normal covenant, you would have one person and then another person, or God and Abraham would have been awake, theoretically, and you would have passed the torch as part of the ceremonial cutting of the covenant back and forth between Abraham being awake and God. But when God cut the covenant with Abraham, Abraham was completely passive. He was passed out in a trance. God did that intentionally to signify that it was a unilateral covenant that God made between him and himself on behalf of the children of Abraham. And it was not contingent. If you read the Bible properly, it's not contingent upon the performance, the holiness, and the righteousness of the Jews. So you have all these Christians who don't bother to study the Bible properly, who make ridiculous statements such as, well, the Jews have forfeited their right to the land of Israel because they're idolatrous and they've sinned. So they no longer have the right to the land of Israel. That because of the Jews' immorality and paganism and sins, etc., that God declared the covenant null and void that he made with Abraham to give the children of Abraham the land of Israel as an everlasting possession, as an everlasting covenant. That's null and void because of all the sinfulness in the Jewish people. And so because of all the sinfulness in the Jew world, the church, the Christian church, has replaced Israel. The Christian church is the new Israel, and it's the Christian church that now has the right to the land of Israel and Jerusalem. Christian church has replaced Israel and is the new Israel of God. So you have all these Christians running around saying this because they're not going to churches where they're being taught the Bible, except 2 or 3 verses out of context or whatever. But if you read the scripture and just interpret it exactly as it says, I mean, it's really a no-brainer to figure out that when God made an everlasting covenant with the children of Abraham, that everlasting means one thing: everlasting, without end. So if God is saying that he made an everlasting covenant with the children of Israel regarding giving them the land of Israel and Jerusalem as an everlasting possession, it's impossible for God to contradict himself when he just swore an oath in covenant giving the descendants of Abraham the land of Jerusalem as an everlasting covenant. It means everlasting. So, I mean, unless you have the IQ of a frog, you know that God can't contradict himself and null and void that covenant. In addition, all this preposterous, non-biblical nonsense about how the church has become the new Israel, and we're talking about in relationship to the land. So you read the Bible specifically as it deals with specific subjects. Okay? And when it comes to the subject specifically of the physical land of Israel and the physical land of Jerusalem, the church is not the inheritor of the physical land of Israel and the physical land of Jerusalem. Okay? I mean, really simple. You got churches, denominations, and Christian movements that teach that. That's false doctrine. It's an everlasting covenant, and it's not contingent upon their performance or their holiness and righteousness any more than a Christian who is saved and is going to heaven. A Christian asks Jesus to forgive them of their sins by the blood of Jesus, by faith. A Christian invites Christ into their life to become born again and is saved. Then, according to the Word of God, if they put their faith in Christ for salvation, they are guaranteed entrance into heaven, they are guaranteed a brand new glorified body, and they're guaranteed eternal life in heaven, in the new earth, the new heaven, and the new Jerusalem. Now, it's guaranteed. A Christian does not lose his salvation if he or she is. Because if you're truly born again, how can you be unborn again? And see, I know a lot of people have theological questions regarding this topic, and say, well, it's possible to lose your salvation. I look at it a little bit differently. To me, the explanation as to why, like people who claim to be born again Christians, how can they sin habitually with no remorse, with no guilt? How can they, go for years, living in all kinds of sins? And how can they do that? Won't they lose their salvation? Well, the way I look at it is, I ask the question: were they really saved to begin with? You see, because if you're saved, the Holy Spirit is working on you. You're being convicted. You may be wrestling with God, but you're under conviction. God's dealing with you. You can't. If you're a true Christian and truly born again, you cannot go on sinning, for decades and stuff without going through unbearable pain that drives you into repentance. So the question really isn't that people are losing their salvation. The question, I think, is more accurately, were they ever saved to begin with? Okay, now, the thing I want to say here is that Christians don't lose their salvation because they sin. Now, if you see a Christian who is completely hard-hearted and indifferent towards their sins year after year, you have a right to ask yourself, were they ever really saved to begin with? But the point is, Christians don't lose the right to get into heaven because they're saved by grace, not of works, lest any man should boast. Now, the Jews don't. This is an everlasting covenant. Everlasting means it's without end. So the Jews can't lose their right, their everlasting covenantal right to the land of Israel and Jerusalem because they sin and are disobedient or whatever. And it's very important to understand that. So in fact, because people don't read their Bible, they get the entire message upside down. It's like they listen to the Bible standing on their heads. And literally, you would have to be standing on your head to endure many of these 1, 2, or 3 Bible verse sermons, Christianity light. I mean, I can't endure it. It's so insipid. I can't endure it. It's like listening. I'm trying not to be unkind. No, because if I say what I think, it'll be unkind, so I won't say it. So the point is that it's a prophetic promise of God that the Jews will be returned to the land in the last days. Now, you also have to understand the interaction between the various kinds of God with not only the Gentiles, but also the Jews. Remember, God initiated numerous covenants between himself and the children of Israel and the children of Abraham. Not just one covenant. There's the Davidic covenant. There's all kinds of covenants. There's the Mosaic covenant. Now, as all these covenants interrelate with one another, you do see an historical pattern regarding the Jews, which is when they're holy and righteous before the Lord, according to the law, God gives them victory over their enemies, and they are in possession of the land, and they defeat their enemies. But then when they start being idolatrous and worshiping pagan idols and committing all kinds of sins and breaking God's laws, they end up getting invaded. They're thrown out of their land. They lose the land. They're thrown out of Israel, and they go into captivity. And then after a cycle, when they finally come to their senses and repent, they're sent back into the land. They get to occupy the land. So there's this cyclical thing going on, depending upon the Jews' performance. But see, it's not a fiction because we're talking about 2 different covenants, the Mosaic covenant and the Abrahamic covenant. You see that the Jews are continually punished by being driven out of the land. They're not allowed to occupy it when they're worshiping idols and breaking God's laws. And so there's this cyclical pattern, disobedience, they're thrown out of the land, they're under captivity, then hopefully they repent and the cycle starts all over again. But when we come to the last days, there's a transition. And that's why you have to study the Bible, to just not peruse it. There's a transition. The transition is you enter the last days. And so when the Bible says, in the last days, he will return his people to the land of Israel, and that's said all over the Old Testament, in 1948, the Jews, despite the fact that they were in a spiritual state of unbelief, despite the fact that they were immoral and are largely immoral today, just like America is largely immoral today. Despite the fact that they're breaking the laws of God, they were divinely put back into the land of Israel. And what comes next is the fulfillment of what's called the 70 weeks of Daniel. This final week, this 7 years, the time of Jacob's trouble or the tribulation period, which is Bible prophecy being fulfilled, and it centers around the Jews. So he said God is not finished with the Jews. God's entire prophetic time clock involves the Jews. So the Jews are in the land of Israel in the last days, and the Antichrist, or the man of sin, arises, and he seduces the world, and he also seduces Israel. So the Jews, instead of looking to the true Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, the Jews are seduced by the man of sin, who is the Antichrist and dwelt by Satan, and they sign a 7-year peace treaty with the Antichrist. So 3.5 years into the tribulation, it becomes obvious to the Jews that this is not their Messiah, that he's a false Messiah, he's the Antichrist, because the Antichrist breaks his treaty with the Jews, and the most horrific thing that the Antichrist can do, he does. The temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem, as Bible prophecy predicts, but the man of sin, the Antichrist, the abomination of desolation, goes into the rebuilt Jewish temple, where there's animal sacrifices, and he sets himself up to be worshipped as God in the holy temple of God in Jerusalem, and demands that Israel and all the world worships him as God, the abomination of desolation. At that point, 3.5 year tribulation point, there's a transition in God's judgment. The great wrath of God starts to be poured out upon the earth. It impacts the Jews, and they go through the time of Jacob's trouble, and God supernaturally protects them. But it is a grueling, horrific experience. But God allows the Jews to go through that, because at the end of the tribulation, they recognize at the second coming that Jesus Christ is indeed the true Messiah of Israel. And Zechariah says, I talked about this in Romans, and it talks about this in Zechariah, but in Zechariah it says that all of Israel begins to have a spiritual recognition that Jesus Christ is truly their God. He is the Messiah. And it says they begin to weep over Jesus as one who is weeping over his lost long son. So the national repentance for rejecting Jesus as Yeshua, Messiah, for all of these centuries. And it says at that point, the unclean spirit departs the land. And then in fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant and the other covenants of God, God initiates the final part of the Davidic covenant that he made with King David. And King David and Jesus Christ, who's the Messiah, rule and reign planet Earth from the new capital of planet Earth, which is Jerusalem. But Jesus, Yeshua, chooses to rule planet Earth from Jerusalem along with King David. And it's a time period, 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ, which is somewhat in many respects like heaven on earth. Jesus will rule and reign planet Earth for 1,000-year millennial reign. And it will be like heaven and earth. But the reason Jesus is doing this is because he is fulfilling the Davidic covenant to give the Jews the land of Israel and Jerusalem to give them the land as an everlasting covenant. The fact that Christ and King David are ruling and reigning from Jerusalem, all of it is a fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. And this 1,000-year millennial reign is a fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. And Israel has a national rebirth spiritually. So it's very important to understand this thing properly. So when Jesus, so this is the first part of the prophetic prediction. Another prophetic prediction, which tells us not exactly where we are in the prophetic timeline, is the fact that the Jews were supernaturally returned to Israel in 1948. That's never happened before. That's why we're in the greatest battle for the heart and minds of mankind in the history of the world. And that's why the title of my new book. You see, there's reasons for it in God's Word, and there's observable reasons for it, like the Jews returning to Jerusalem and Israel in the last days. And so Christ continues to talk. And the disciples ask him, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." So there's going to be enormous spiritual deception. That's going on right now, especially in the evangelical church. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. There are hot spots all over planet Earth right now. That one event could lead to literally hundreds of wars could potentially break out at this moment. And some of those wars could very likely lead to World War III. So there's wars and rumors of wars at an unprecedented scale. That's a fact. All you have to do is be aware of the news all around you. And then it says, Jesus said, "These things must come to pass. End is not yet. For nation will rise against nation." That's happening now. Kingdom against kingdom. Now, when you go to the actual translation of nation against nation, it comes from the root word ethnos, from which we get the word racial group or ethnic group. So what it really means here is not just nation will rise against nation, but one ethnic group and one racial group will rise up against another racial or ethnic group. And we see this all over planet Earth right now, as there are powerful forces deliberately agitating from behind the scenes race wars. And Christ is predicting this as a sign of the time. And then there will be famines, mass starvation, pestilence, diseases, and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginnings of sorrows. The beginnings of sorrows of the Great Tribulation. But here's the point. When Jesus said that the signs of the times will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places, he doesn't say specifically what the origination of these earthquakes and these pestilence and famines in various places are. The reality is, we have had the technology for 40 years to modify the weather. I write that at length in my new book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. And I've written about it in other books, like Conquering the Matrix. And weather modification weapons are a reality. And China, Russia, and the United States especially, we have geoengineering, which can also be used to modify the weather, but it could also be used to tsunamis, earthquakes, storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, all kinds of things. So when you see all this crazy and strange weather, you should be self-educated to the point where you understand that a lot of this crazy weather and some of these earthquakes and tsunamis, etc., are being generated by our technology. And this isn't like a recent development. This has been going on for 40 years. The U.S. military openly, and I discuss this in my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World, I discuss the U.S. military's openly published document called Owning the Weather. And it talks about the U.S. military having military superiority because we can control all the weather by 2025. And that's done with geoengineering. And what is geoengineering? Well, that's EMF fields, the same things as brainwaves, electromagnetic frequency. And so you have technological stations like HAARP in Alaska, which fires brainwaves, essentially, into the ionosphere, heats up the ionosphere, boils the ions. And by changing the electromagnetic frequency in the ionosphere, you can change people's moods, mindsets, cause disease, but you can also create storms, superstorms, earthquakes, tsunamis, droughts, whatever. You see, some of this freaky, strange weather and stuff you've been seeing, it's man-made. And this is not a conspiracy theory. It's only a conspiracy theory if you're an idiot. If you do research and do your homework, it's documented proof. And really, you need to stop talking to idiots in order to get verification. Why would you talk to somebody who is ignorant, does no research, has no idea what they're talking about, and ask them, oh, do you believe that we can modify the weather? Why would you ask someone who hasn't spent 5 minutes thinking about it or reading about it a question like that? Of course they can't give you an intelligent answer because they haven't spent 5 minutes researching it. And I'm not talking about, you don't have to go to conspiracy theory websites. You can read, for example, I have the entire speech in the contents of my book, Conquering the Matrix, where the former head of the CIA, Brennan, gives a lengthy speech about the reality of weather modification technology. Openly admits it. It's openly admitted all over the place. But if you don't read and you just watch the Roku Channel, then, you're going to be clueless. And God does not want his people clueless. Being clueless means you lack vision and wisdom. And God says in his word, my people perish for lack of wisdom and vision. So, then when it talks about famines and pestilences, these are plagues. Are they natural plagues? I'm sure some of them are that Christ is talking about. But see, I think Christ knows I know that Christ knows the whole multidimensional level of what's happening on earth right now. Many of the diseases that are affecting people all over the world are man-made biological viruses, man-made biological plagues, made in laboratories as weapons of biological warfare. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Okay, this is a serious one. We just did a program the other day about we are now, historically, the world is experiencing the highest level of persecution against Christians and the highest level of persecution against Christian churches in the history of the world. It's now at its highest level. And I did a whole show a couple of days ago about it. And it's happening in many different nations. And they're killing, torturing, raping Christians at staggering levels. And Christ does not want us to be passive or sleepy and indifferent as our brothers and sisters in Jesus who are part of the supernatural body of Christ, just like we are. When he says that there will be persecution, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. The purpose of reading that is not to go, oh wow, this is a sign that Christ is coming back. Let's rejoice. Man, you really have a bent somewhere in your mind. You got dropped on the head when you were in the crib. That's not how you're supposed to react to that. You're supposed to have the love of Christ in your heart, and you should have compassion when you hear about the sufferings of Christians in foreign nations. Whatever power God has given us, in addition to the power of prayer, we need to use that power and influence to put pressure on our elected representatives and other people. We need to turn up their heat real fast and demand that our elected officials take measures to stop this persecution. We are part of the body of Christ, but by the grace of God, we live in the most powerful nation on planet Earth. And some people go to these churches that have sermons designed, again, for a third grader. Your votes matter. I'm not making a political bias here. Your votes matter. You want to vote for people who are going to end persecution here in the United States and end it in foreign nations. And other acts against Jews and Christians that are violent, where people are the Judeo-Christian faith are being killed and slaughtered in America and other places. Christians are so self-righteous and so myopic because they're going to dumb down churches in many cases, not all cases, with dumbed down sermons. And you can do the math. Dumbed down sermons, dumbed down messages produces dumbed down Christians. And dumbed down Christians can't even, do 2 + 2 = 4. So I've seen a lot of presidents. I've never seen a president with the guts and the follow through as President Donald Trump, who sat down with the president of Nigeria, where they're raping, torturing, and slaughtering Christians like crazy, persecuting Christians like crazy. And he demanded that the head of Nigeria put an end to it. And he demanded that the head of Nigeria use the Nigerian military to end it, or that there would be immediate, severe economic consequences. Now, Trump wasn't doing that like a photo op. And I don't remember any president of either party ever taking continually bold stands for the persecuted church. He meant it. And if this guy doesn't do something, he's not going to continue to give Nigeria aid or whatever else they're getting. Nigeria will be punished economically. We've never had a president. We had a lot of presidents who claim to be Christians. They've never done a thing. In communist China, the level of persecution is the worst that it's ever been, especially under their mass surveillance system, which is designed and built by American tech giants. Their surveillance system, which keeps a continual numerical score on every citizen that rates them because they're under constant surveillance, and then a number shows up by their face on computer screens, and it's their score. It's called, I think, their social credit score. So if they're good communists and do everything right, according to the Communist Party in China, they have a good social score that the Communist Party will be nice to them. But if they go to Bible studies, they'll probably be, they say, the Chinese say that this is worse than being sent to prison, worse than being sent to concentration camps, because if you get the Bible or saying God bless you or praying or whatever else, the Communist Chinese Party is totally against Christianity. So if you practice your faith, even quietly, you get terrible negative ratings in your social score. You can't get a job, you can't buy food, you can't eat, you can't survive. It's hell on earth. So we all understand that Communist China is the most powerful economic player besides the United States in the world. They have enormous power. But I've been around a little while. And again, I'm going to mention this to you because many of you may not remember this. Do like it was yesterday. Some of the biggest name major Christian leaders, this was several decades ago, the biggest name major Christian leaders in the United States, who back then, these people were basically biblical and did a lot of good things. These were leaders, Christian leaders, unlike the current generation where you have a lot of cop-outs and sellouts. These Christian leaders back several decades ago, they weren't perfect, but they did a lot of good things and they stood up for the Bible, etc. But they were conned by the globalists. They were conned by them. And then they used their platforms and their television ministries and everything else to con the body of Christ. And this is what the lie that they told us over and over again. These major Christian leaders, again, they did many good things. But in this area, they failed. They told us continually that these trade treaties would be great things for America. See, they were brainwashed by the globalists. And then they specifically said, because a lot of Bible-believing Christians that were intelligent were raising serious objections. What do you mean we're going to have China and all these trade treaties? Communist China is persecuting Christians like crazy. Now it's worse today. And there were a lot of Christians who were smart and saying, no, we shouldn't be doing any trade deals with China. We need to boycott China. But these major Christian leaders went along with the globalist line from the Council on Foreign Relations, Rockefeller, Kissinger, and the rest of the snakes. And they said, well, the best way to influence the Chinese and the Communist Chinese government is to allow them to do business with us, to integrate them into the global community. And by allowing them to trade with us and be involved with us in business and economics, that's the only way we'll be able to exert influence. And then after they start being part of us economically and start trading with us, they'll loosen up and they'll lighten up and they'll stop persecuting Christians. So that caused all the Christians to back off their protests. But all of these Christian leaders, at least in this area, were dead wrong. Dead wrong. They were conned by the globalists. The evangelical leaders are notoriously conned by the globalists to this day. And the exact opposite happened, hasn't it? China's economy is booming, or at least compared to most of the world's economies. Communist China is one of the most powerful nations on the earth. They own the state of California. They own a big chunk of the U.S. Very, very powerful nation, very prosperous. Now, the theory that by integrating them and doing business with them would cause them to stop persecuting the Christian church and the Christians in China was completely wrong, because the persecution against Christians and the persecution against the Christian church in China is the highest level it's ever been, because of mass surveillance built by U.S. tech giants, which, by the way, is going to be used on us. I hope you know, some of your friends that are in the dazed state you need to wake them up. It's simply an experiment. There's a reason why. Listen carefully, and please don't take this as being arrogant. I deliberately use statements that can appear to be abrupt and somewhat shocking or whatever. I do that to wake people up. It's just simply a matter of waking people up and getting their attention, to motivate them for good purposes. But you see, ask yourself the question, why our intelligence communities and our government handed over the control and the secrets of the internet. Why would they hand it over to the Communist Chinese government? Okay, here's the dirty truth. They handed over control of it to the Communist Chinese government because that way they can say, well, we're abiding by the Constitution. Meanwhile, in a serpent election, they turned over the control of the internet and surveillance to the Communist Chinese, who have no laws prohibiting spying and profiling and doing every other unconstitutional thing under the sun. It was just a chess game maneuver to allow them to do unconstitutional things against things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, so on and so forth. That's why the Communist Chinese are in control of the internet. It was intentional. And when Zuckerberg says he's going to give control over Facebook to the government, that's what they do in totalitarian nations. The last entity that our founding fathers would ever have wanted to control the internet was the government. That guarantees there will be no freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, etc., because you have a biased partisan system. So you need to wake up. What they're doing in China is a trial run. So let's do the math together. With all their economic integration, with all their power, the Communist Chinese government is persecuting Christians worse than they ever have. That means horrible suffering for Christians, true Christians in China, because of the social credit score. We need to take a stand. Now, I'm not trying to be naive. China is a very, very powerful nation economically. But you just bang the toe of a giant hard enough, and you might get a reaction. We are, as the church in America, we are relatively silent about the persecuted church. And we need to repent of that sin. And we need to come together and occupy the land like Christ commanded us to. and taken into business. We need to do everything in our power, which we have not done, to help the persecuted Christian church. And you need to help by spreading that word, and I need to help by spreading that word. Because God certainly does not want us in America, where we, relatively speaking, have some power, some influence, to be silent about the persecution of the Christian church, just like we're not supposed to be silent about human sex trafficking or pedophiles preying on children. Now, everybody in America is, at least, they weren't before, but now they're aware of human sex trafficking and pedophilia. They're aware of it. The average mother, the average American is very aware of it. So that's helpful because laws are getting passed to attempt to stop it. But the first thing that had to come was awareness. We as Christians have not raised the level of awareness regarding the reality of the persecuted Christian church. And we need to do that. That's why Jesus Christ said, "Occupy until I come." And we need to do that because guess what? What if we displease God and his form of judgment is to simply let us be treated like allowed others to be treated in terms of persecution? You see, what we sow, we reap. And I fear God in a good way. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I certainly do not want to be sowing seeds of indifference regarding the persecuted Christian church before a holy God. And I don't think you do either. So, Christ, again, explains what else is going to happen in what is called the signs of the times. Right after he talks about the tribulation and believers being hated and killed by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended and betray one another and hate one another. That speaks to I believe, the general condition and the deterioration of true spiritual love between Christians and the absence of genuine love in society. Everything becomes a meat market, kill or be killed. Society, culture, families, it becomes brutal and ugly and dark and satanic by nature. That's a sign of the last days. And then Christ says, then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. Now, we have many false prophets who are deceiving many. But many of the false prophets, most Christians are not even aware that they're false prophets, because some of these false prophets would fit into the category or under the category of secular false prophets. You see, an irrational belief in the religion of communism or the religion of socialism or the religion of Marxism, that's a false prophet. It may be secular, but they're functioning as false prophets and deceiving millions and millions of Christians, along with actual Christian leaders that are false prophets. How do we know what a false prophet is? Secular or Christian or occultic or whatever? We know what a false prophet is because what they teach is diametrically opposed, or at the very least, it's a counterfeit of God's word. So it may appear to be Christ-like in its message, but it deviates at crucial points. Therefore, it becomes very dangerous. And this is what a false prophet is. And we need to know the Word of God on a higher level. Then we will not be easily deceived. So Jesus, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Gangs shooting people in the face, stealing kids. I mean, you know what's happening. It's horrific. And it's unprecedented. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So, the signs of the times are used by God prophetically. But think about 74% of the churches in America have a policy forbidding the teaching of Bible prophecy. So they don't even know what the signs of the times are of what's going to occur before Christ comes in his second coming. Now, we need to deal with that. So how do we deal with it? We have to communicate aggressively, intelligently, and led by the Holy Spirit. We have to communicate to people that are Christians, people who are non-Christians, the truth of God's word. And if 74% of the evangelical church, which is basically an accurate percentage number, 74% of evangelical churches do not preach Bible prophecy. So that people wouldn't know what the signs of the times are. That's exactly what the devil wants, the great deceiver. So we have to break that trance state, because it is a trance state. The Bible talks about it as a great delusion. The great delusion is a supernatural delusion. That means it's satanic and demonic at its root. It may involve scientific mind control, but it's a satanic delusion. And it's the supernatural force of evil that comes in and grabs people's minds so that they can't see the obvious reality staring them in the face. But it's not that Satan is all-powerful. He's not. God is all-powerful. But because God's people have chosen to sin and ignore God's word, they have chosen to be deceived. They have welcomed the deception. So our hearts should be filled with the love of Christ for them, despite their rebellion. And this is why it was like the Lord set my inner heart on fire when I was looking at notes in my studio a while back. And in my notes, I had written down the words, "The greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world." And even though it was lengthy, I said, this has to be the title of my new book, because it captures the very central message I'm trying to communicate. And that book is available right now. If you go to paulmcguire.us, you can pre-order the book. You get a financial discount off the book. You get a autographed copy, and you get your copy rushed to you before it becomes available to the public. And it's important that this message gets out at this time, because this is what keeps going through my mind and heart. And this is like the Lord set me on fire regarding this. And it's hard to express in thoughts. Well, I expressed it in the title of the book, but what keeps going through my heart and mind is the fact that right now, at this second, we are factually, and according to Bible prophecy, we are right smack in the middle of the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. This battle is raged with an intensity and fierceness all around us. And you can visibly perceive it with your eyes and your ears, or watching the news or whatever. You can see the evidence of this chaos in this raging battle all around us. You can, with your mind, you can intellectually process this. It's obvious we're in the middle of a raging battle, because the secular analysts and experts are all saying similar things from a secular perspective, of course, but they're saying, this is it. We either get our act together or this is the end of the world. That's what they're essentially saying on so many different levels. So secular analysts and experts are saying this. The Word of God says it. Anyone who's remotely awake, remotely alive, should recognize this, because the evidence of this is everywhere. So here we are, right in the middle. This battle is so intense. It's been building for a long time, but it's exploding with intensity. The intensity of this battle, the demonic armies that have been unleashed upon America and other nations of the world. You can sense this. You can understand this. All of you that are spiritually awake, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The demonic hordes from hell, demonic armies have been unleashed by Satan. Evil spirits, principalities and powers of all kinds have been unleashed upon America and other nations in the world. The signs of the times that Christ is talking about are evident. The freak weather, the threat of an EMP attack and World War III and terrorism and all of these things building, mass surveillance, really the Antichrist technology already in place in the sense that microchip implants have been around for at least 20 years. The 5G technology is deadly in what it can do. And all of this can easily be converted into Mark of the Beast technology. So there's evidences all around us that we are in this unprecedented battle. And yet Christ never told his church, never told Christians to go hide, to deny reality, because if you deny reality, by the way, you're living a lie. And sadly to say, most Christians that you and I meet, because they have chosen volitionally with an act of their will to deny reality, they are living in a lie. When you deny reality, you're rejecting Christ. Because reality, good or bad, is the truth. And you can verify reality. If you're stoned on drugs, you can't tell what's real or unreal. But if you look at reality, you can verify it with your senses and your God-given intellect. But so many Christians not only don't read the Bible, they choose to live in some kind of escapist daydream world. And you talk to them, and it's scary. When I talk to these people, it's scary, but I see it. It's the norm. It's the norm. When I begin to raise, and every one of you listening to me know exactly what I'm talking about. You enter into a conversation with someone. You enter into a conversation with somebody who claims to be a Christian. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. You kind of test the waters to see what kind of Christian they are. Like the depth of their relationship with Christ. Do they really know what's going on prophetically? Do they know what's going on, period? And so you float out these little test questions. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about because you do the same thing that I do. It's a technique you and I use to kind of probe and find where they're at. So if you float out a test question and you might talk about 5G, okay? Or you might talk about any number of subjects that, and when these are like test questions we give them. And what we are is we're kind of reading them to find out how awake or how asleep they are. When all they can do is repeat like they're in a hypnotic trance. Oh, 5G is going to be wonderful because it's going to make our internet and wireless move so much quicker. You know that person's programmed. If they don't even know what the signs of the times are. If they think, Christ isn't going to come for 1,000,000 years, and you're just paranoid in a conspiracy theory if you think Jesus is coming, you're getting kind of an accurate thermometer test of their spiritual temperature. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So what you've discovered, as I've discovered, is the vast majority of people that you talk to, who call themselves Christians, are completely oblivious of the fact that we are right now, prophetically, in the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind in the history of the world. And pick it up. They look at you strangely. You give them a sane, rational, fact-based statement, and they look at you like you're crazy. But in actuality, they're crazy because they're living in some unreal world. And so you try to navigate the situation as best you can. You don't want to blow it up into an argument, so you try to plant some seeds, you pray for them. But that's part of the warfare, because what's going on is in all the hearts and minds of young people and older people and people you meet, there's a war going on for their hearts and minds. There's a very real devil and demonic powers trying to capture the control of the hearts and minds of every child, young adult in this world and in this nation. Satan wants to keep every soul that he can from going into heaven. He wants to blind them from the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ using his satanic power. So he wants to keep them in a daze so they can't see the truth. What's the truth? That Christ is returning, Bible prophecy is real, and that we are in an all-out spiritual war. So that's what the battle is. The battle is going on internally in their hearts and their minds and their brains and their emotions. There's literally going on a fight between the forces of good and the forces of evil, or the forces of God and the forces of Satan. See, when people start to embrace irrationally the lie, and that's exactly what it is, the lie of the theory of evolution. They've been programmed. Ultimately, they've been programmed by Satan and Luciferian forces. Why? Because scientifically, there is no proof that evolution is true. 80 million fossil records, and not one fossil record gives the evolutionists the scientific empirical evidence that they need to prove that one species ever evolved into a different and higher order of species. It's never happened in the history of the universe. That's why there's a missing link. That's why they have no fossil record. The bottom line is they have no scientific evidence to prove the biggest fraud ever perpetuated on mankind, which is that man randomly evolved from a primordial mud puddle. And see, by brainwashing the children and the adults that evolution is true when there's no facts to support it, this way you get to kill off God. God doesn't exist. The Bible's not scientific. There is no right. There is no wrong. There's no heaven. There's no hell. Whatever feels good, do it. You see what happened? The devil really, that's a master stroke of the devil's deceptive genius, because in that one move, brainwashing people to accept the lie of evolution, you conquer the heart and mind of a child and an individual. See, that's what's going on. It's the battle. And 5G, 5G, nothing wrong with that. Listen, the scientific data, it's all in my new book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Mankind in the History of the World. I write the truth about the scientists that have petitioned the UN, respected scientists, huge numbers of them that have petitioned the UN, warning of the severe health, brain dangers of 5G technology, because 5G technology operates within the same frequency range, and I explain all this in my new book. It operates in the same frequency range as directed energy beam weapons, which can be used as non-lethal directed energy beam weapons to disperse crowds, or lethal directed energy beam weapons, where you can kill somebody in seconds with an invisible electromagnetic wave. And that's the same frequency range as 5G technology. See, this is science. This isn't like delusional stuff. The disintegration of the human body, the killing of your immune system because of genetically modified foods or organisms, GMOs. See, these are all lies that are being told to the American people. And because people are brainwashed and they're watching the same brainwashing mainstream media, you never get to hear the truth. And yet, Jesus Christ said, the truth shall set you free. So this is a battle. This is the battle for the hearts and minds of mankind. And it's going on in your children's lives, your grandchildren, your friends, your neighbors. And so it's very important how you conduct yourself, that you walk like an ambassador for Christ, that you're perceived as rational, intelligent, trustworthy. It's very important that your witness is not just the fruit of the Spirit and the truth of God's Word, but like it or not, we live in an age of deception, and many people will judge you simply by the image. Now, the point is that you present yourself as visually convincing as you can. You project an image of being credible, straightforward, trustworthy. You know what I'm saying? Because this is part of the battle. This is why children respect and disrespect their parents. And the doors are shut or the doors are open for them to hear the gospel. And there's so much more. But as I look at the situation, the Holy Spirit grieves in my heart with an anguish. We're in the middle of this raging spiritual battle, and the average Christian is completely out of the loop, completely disconnected from reality, has no awareness of what's really going on. And because of that, the powers of hell are just unleashed with nobody pulling the leash on the devil. And yet God gave us the power to pull the leash on the devil through prayer, through evangelism, by making disciples, by communicating biblical truth everywhere we go. And that means being smart enough to do an end run around censorship. It's a battle I'm facing right now. This ministry's facing that battle right now. We're facing a battle against hidden censorship because the Bible, even positive, uplifting Bible verses, have become offensive. They're trying to censor that. And if God's people won't take a stand, it will really be censored. Like no opportunity whatsoever. So, I encourage you, I ask you to go to paulmcguire.us, our website, paulmcguire.us, spread these programs and messages far and wide, and pre-order yourself a copy of The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World. You get a financial discount, you get an autographed copy, and you get a copy rushed to you before it's available to the general public. You know, I believe God leads every one of our lives if we will seek His face by His grace. We don't have to be perfect for God to use us, thank God. But I have asked God to lead me and to guide me. And I know what this ministry has been called to do and what I've been called to do. And that is to intelligently and prophetically teach this message along with the message of salvation and occupying the land until I come. But to remove the blindness off God's people and children and others so that they can see the truth of the gospel, not just salvation, but all the truth in God's word. That's the only way we can make a change. You know, in North Korea and in communist China in World War II, the communists who were experts in scientific mind control and brainwashing, when they captured American prisoners of war in North Korea and in China and other places, they would subject American soldiers to instant brainwashing, sleep deprivation, drugs, torture, all kinds of things. And what they discovered was that those soldiers who had an internal or inward belief system, like they actually believed in God, they believed in the Bible. They didn't have to be Bible scholars, but those soldiers who had an actual inner belief system, like they were Christians, and they believed in America, and they believed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that those soldiers who were captured, and they did everything in their power to brainwash soldiers and break them, but they found it next to impossible to break or mind control or brainwash the American soldiers who had an inner belief system of, let's say, Christianity or a belief in America. They could not brainwash these men who had a belief system based on the Bible. They couldn't take over their minds. Yet, and these were experts, these communist experts in brainwashing in North Korea and China, etc. The American soldiers who didn't really have any system, didn't really believe in anything, didn't know what they believed, didn't know if they believed in God, didn't know if they believed in America. They were kind of hollow inside. The communist Chinese brainwashing experts realized that these empty soldiers who didn't have an internal belief system were the easiest to brainwash, to control, and to take control of their minds. They could do it. Their brainwashing techniques worked. on the soldiers that didn't have a belief system. But it was next to impossible to take control of the minds of the Christians and those soldiers who had a belief system in America and God and country, etc. So what I'm sharing with you is this is the primary purpose of Paul McGuire Ministries and Paradise Mountain Church, is to get the truth into the hearts and minds of as many people as possible, as fast as possible. Why? Because once you get the truth, once you seed the truth of God's Word into the hearts and minds of people, children, young adults, Christians, they become inwardly resistant against deception. They're captured by the powers of darkness. You're able to preach the gospel and they actually will get saved because their hearts have not been hardened. And you can transform a country one heart and mind at a time. And this is the most important thing that we can do because, listen, wake up. The day may come when this great God-given privilege we have is no longer available to us. We're fighting right now, this ministry, against censorship. But at least we can fight against it. The day may come when, because of the apathy of so many Christians, the day may come when we even have the opportunity to communicate like we do now. We still have an open door. And so we need to thank God that we have an open door and faithfully occupy the land until he comes with a spiritual aggressiveness. Because that's what Jesus wants us to do. Jesus Christ wants us to be victorious and overcomers. Not for personal satisfaction, but for the purposes of his kingdom. So I'm asking you to join me and this ministry as a partner, a vibrant, alive partner in Christ, a fellow member of the body of Christ. I'm asking you to join me and to become a prayer warrior, because without your prayers, nothing happens. And I thank God for all of your prayers. It's your prayers that literally determine whether it's victory or failure on a daily basis. Your prayers are more powerful than you will ever know. And so I'm deeply thankful for your prayers. And those of you that use the gifting and talents you have to spread our television messages, our radio program, and other messages far and wide to people to do an end run around censorship. Please believe me, they have years with robotic techniques, algorithms. I have been personally sending out privately to many of you because the Lord put it on my heart. I've been personally sending out privately to you through Facebook personal messages from me where I will read something that you wrote and I'll send you a Bible verse to encourage you and lift you up. And every verse that I've sent out is encouraging and positive. And I won't get into all the details, but Facebook prohibited me, at least for the time being, from sending private messages to those people who chose to be followers of the Paul McGuire public figure Facebook page. So I'm not spamming anybody or anything like that. I'm sending encouraging Bible verses personally to people by name to lift them up. And like 99% of the people that I've sent them to have answered me back, and they're extremely thankful, and they welcome this. And yet, because they're Bibles, even the positive ones, I'm experiencing censorship. And I'm sending these privately to you. Many of you have received them. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not sending them publicly. I'm sending them privately. But I am blocked now from when you respond favorably to the Bible verse or whatever a personal note I may have sent you. They're blocking me from talking to you privately. Now, do you think for 1 second, if I was of a different religion or a different kind of group or whatever, do you think they would dare to do that? No, they're doing it because I'm a Christian and the message is Christian. And so I'm not I'm using intelligence. I need your prayers. I need you to speak out on our behalf and my behalf. But I think it's very selfish when any Christian is having their rights taken away or their freedoms taken away, and they choose not to fight it. And I'm talking about in an intelligent, law-abiding, effective manner. I hear Christians all the time say, well, we chose to just, forgive or whatever. That's very selfish. That's very selfish. Because you wouldn't stand up for your rights. Do you know what that means? It means you've made it really easy for whoever to take away the rights of other Christians because you wouldn't take a stand. And you think that's forgiving? That's not forgiving. What you're doing is that you think, because people don't read the Bible, they don't meditate, they don't think. If I was to allow them to do this and to get away with it without resistance on my part and your part, then I would just make it easier for them to stamp out all the other Christians who want to share Bibles on their Facebook pages or their ministry pages. I have to resist, not for me personally. I have to resist for all the other people. Because if they can get away with it, they're going to keep doing it until they wipe all of us out. So, I would be incredibly selfish if I didn't resist this and fight it. Now, I'm doing it in a polite, intelligent, and effective manner, but I'm not, believe me, I have no intention of giving in or giving up. It's not even an option because I don't think in those terms. It may take time. It may take a little extra time. Whatever it takes, then I'm in 100%. And that's how we have to live the Christian life. So I ask you to join me in that fight, because by blocking me from sending out Bible verses, what else is next? And then finally, we need your financial help and donations and contributions. Running a ministry like this is extremely expensive because just the cost of all the channels we're on and the cost of production, etc., to continue to communicate, to continue video, radio, and do all the other things we do, which goes globally. And people are getting saved, and people are repenting and turning their lives back to Jesus Christ, and changes are being made. Why do I know this? Because I've been emailing so many of you personally in the last week or so. You've personally given me, up until the point I was blocked. You're not blocked, I'm blocked. You were personally telling me how this ministry has touched you and impacted your friends, and people got saved. And I got from so many of you that was really a blessing to me and encouraging to me. So I thank God for each and every one of you that are faithful, that you've sought the Lord, and you've asked God, Lord, how can I help Paul McGuire Ministries in Paradise Mountain Church financially? And then whatever the Lord tells you to do, you obey Him. So thank you for your gifts and contributions. You can do all of that, including pre-order the brand new book at paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. We have a Paradise Mountain Church meeting coming up May 29th, and we have another one coming up in June. We'll see you at those meetings. It's always a blessing to see you in person. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Help us with the Facebook situation, by the way. I'm Paul McGuire, and visit paulmcguire.us. God bless you.